I still remember the way she said it. I'll disappear. It wasn't dramatic. Just quiet. Almost like she was warning me in advance. Like some people warn about rain when they already feel it coming. That was before I even knew her name. The first time I saw her, I was wiping grease off my hands at the small repair shop near the edge of town. The kind that smells like burnt oil, metal shavings, and too much coffee. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, holding her car keys in one hand and a folder of papers in the other. Something about her posture didn't fit the scene. Too precise, too calm, like she was holding herself together. Her eyes scanned the place once, taking in the cracked tiles, the calendar still stuck on last month, and me, standing there, probably looking like I'd just lost a fight with an engine. "Is there anyone here who actually fixes things?" she asked. Her tone wasn't rude, just exact. The kind of voice that made words sound more deliberate than they were. I told her I did. She handed me her keys. Her car needed something minor, alternator issue, nothing dramatic. But she waited anyway, sitting in the corner of the small waiting area where the air conditioner hummed louder than the radio. I caught myself glancing at her reflection in the glass door every few minutes. Not because she was beautiful in the obvious sense, though she was, but because she looked like someone who didn't belong anywhere loud. At one point, I asked if she wanted coffee. She said no, then changed her mind 2 seconds later. When I brought her the mug, she smiled, a short, distracted kind of smile. The kind people give when they're somewhere else entirely. She wrapped her hands around the cup, even though it was too hot. "What do you do here all day?" she asked. "Mostly listen to things break," I said, "and pretend I can fix them." She gave a small laugh, the kind that ends too quickly, like she caught herself. There was silence after that, a long one, but not empty. She told me later that she used to teach literature at a community college before something changed. She didn't say what. I didn't ask. There was something in her face that said she'd already answered that question too many times. While I tightened a bolt under her hood, she stood near the doorway, arms folded, watching me like she was studying a painting. "Do you always work this late?" she asked. "Only when someone interesting shows up," I said, not thinking it through. She looked away, not offended, not flattered, just aware. Like she'd heard the kind of thing before, but didn't quite know what to do with it anymore. By the time her car was ready, the sky outside had turned to deep blue. Streetlights flickered on, throwing pale light through the garage. I wiped my hands again, handed her the invoice, and she just looked at me for a moment, like she wanted to say something and decided against it. Then she said that line. "I'll disappear," she murmured, half smiling, as she slid into the driver's seat. I laughed, softly, not knowing why. "Then I'll keep looking until I find you." She closed the door. The taillights faded down the road, red dots shrinking into the night. That was 3 weeks ago. Her car's fine. I checked the paperwork twice. But I still catch myself watching the road outside the shop whenever I hear an engine slow down. Not waiting, just listening. Because some people don't vanish all at once. They fade in small, quiet ways. And I think that night, she left something behind that I still haven't figured out how to fix. She came back on a Tuesday. Not for a repair this time. She said she needed help figuring out some noise her car was making that never actually happened while I was around. I knew what that meant. It wasn't really about the noise. Still, I didn't say that out loud. The day was slow, heat curling up from the asphalt, radio static filling the pauses between us. She wore a pale gray shirt, sleeves rolled neatly up, and a look that didn't quite fit the sunlight, like she was still half somewhere else. I opened the hood again, more for her than for the car. She leaned against the side of the vehicle, arms folded. I could feel her watching me, though every time I looked up, she'd glance away, pretending to study the posters on the wall, the chipped paint on the doorframe. "You're younger than I thought," she said after a while. I smiled. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's not," she said, then hesitated. "It just makes me feel old." Her voice thinned at the edges, soft, but edged with something that wasn't about age at all. I closed the hood and wiped my hands. "You don't look old," I said, too quickly. She laughed under her breath, that same half laugh from before, and shook her head. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you don't know what you mean yet." That line landed somewhere deeper than I expected. For a moment, I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I just leaned back against the workbench, pretending to read the clipboard. She started talking after that, about the community center she volunteered at, about how she liked the smell of paper and coffee in quiet places, about her father's watch that never worked, but she wore anyway. She wasn't trying to share anything. It was more like she was letting pieces slip out. Her fingers brushed the edge of the counter as she spoke, slow, thoughtful movements, as if she needed to keep them busy to stay composed. I noticed the faint outline of a tan line on her ring finger. Empty now, but still there. At one point, she went quiet mid-sentence. I thought she was done, but then I saw her eyes, distant, unfocused, like she was somewhere in a memory she hadn't meant to step into. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She blinked, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, just tired." "From what?" She didn't answer. The silence between us felt alive. Not heavy, just aware. When she finally left, she paused by the doorway, one hand resting on the frame. "You shouldn't wait around for people like me," she said softly, not looking back. I didn't know how to reply, so I just said, "Then stop coming back if you don't want me to." That made her turn, just slightly. Her eyes met mine, calm but uncertain. Then she gave the smallest smile, one that barely happened before it disappeared again. And then she was gone, leaving behind the smell of coffee, the sound of her soft laughter still echoing in the air, and the feeling that something invisible had shifted. Something I wasn't supposed to touch, but already had. It was raining that evening, the kind of steady, deliberate rain that makes every sound feel closer than it should. I was closing the shop early when I saw her car pull up, wipers fighting the downpour. She sat there for a moment before stepping out, hair already damp by the time she reached the doorway. "I didn't mean to bother you," she said, brushing water from her sleeve. "I just didn't want to drive home yet." There was no reason to say yes, but I did anyway. I turned the sign to closed and let her in. The place smelled like oil and rain-soaked asphalt. She stood near the counter, arms folded, taking in the silence. "You ever notice how quiet everything gets when it rains?" she said. "Yeah," I replied, "like the world's holding its breath." She smiled faintly, and for a second it felt like we were both listening for something neither of us could name. We sat on two old stools near the back, drinking instant coffee from paper cups. The shop lights buzzed overhead. She'd taken off her jacket, and her hair, damp, a few strands sticking to her cheek, made her look softer than usual. Tired, but real. She told me about the college where she used to teach, the way the classrooms smelled of chalk and old paper, the awkwardness of silence when no one raised their hand. Then she mentioned her ex, just in passing, like it slipped out. "His name still shows up sometimes," she said, looking down at her coffee. "Bank emails. Insurance forms. Like he's still there, hidden in the paperwork." I didn't say anything. I just watched the way her thumb traced the rim of the cup, slow, rhythmic. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen and didn't answer, just set it face down on the counter. For a few seconds, the sound of the rain filled everything. The roof, the street, the pause between us. "Was that him?" I asked quietly. She didn't look up. "Does it matter?" I wanted to say yes, that it mattered more than I wanted it to, but the words caught somewhere in my throat. The air felt different after that, like something had shifted just slightly out of place. She stood, walked toward the doorway, and stopped beside me, close enough that I could smell rain on her skin. She was staring out the window, at nothing in particular, fingers resting lightly on the counter. I could have reached out, just a few inches. Instead, I said, "You'll get sick if you drive in this." "I've been sicker," she said, almost smiling. The line made me laugh, quietly, and when she turned to look at me, her expression softened, open in a way I hadn't seen before. There was a pause then, long enough for something almost to happen. Her breath hitched. Mine did too. Then her phone buzzed again. She stepped back, picked it up, and whispered, "I should go." By the time the door closed behind her, the rain had turned heavier, drowning the sound of her car as it left. And I stood there, still feeling the warmth of where she'd stood, a space that suddenly felt too empty, too charged, too real. She came by after hours again. No rain this time, just the kind of dry evening that feels too quiet, where every sound echoes longer than it should. I didn't ask why she was there. I just opened the door, stepped aside, and watched her walk in. She looked different, tired, like she'd been holding her breath all day. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied. Neither of us spoke for a while. She leaned against the counter, arms folded like always, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "I thought maybe you'd be gone by now," she said. "Why?" "Because that's what people do," she murmured. "They eventually stop waiting." The words hit harder than I expected. I didn't have an answer for them. We ended up sitting across from each other at the small metal table near the back, the one I used for sorting parts. She ran her fingers along a crack in the surface, following its line like it meant something. I tried to joke, something about how that table was older than me, but it fell flat. She just gave a small, distant smile. Then, without looking up, she said, "This, whatever this is, it's not supposed to happen." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the fracture underneath. I swallowed. "I know. So why are you still here?" "Because you keep coming back." That made her look up, and for the first time, there was no distance in her eyes, just exhaustion, something raw and almost afraid. She leaned forward slightly. "You don't understand. You remind me of something I tried to forget." "What?" I asked. She shook her head. "Who I used to be, before I started pretending." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and the silence after was unbearable. I wanted to reach for her hand, to say something that would make it less heavy, but I didn't. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You're too young to understand how people ruin each other without meaning to." "I don't want to ruin you," I said quietly. She smiled at that, not out of kindness, but out of recognition. "You already could." Neither of us moved. The clock on the wall ticked too loud. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, but it felt miles away. I finally said, "So what do we do now?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes softened, but not in a way that promised anything. "We stop pretending," she whispered. The air between us tightened. I could feel her hesitation like static, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. Then she stood, slowly, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "You make it hard to stay, you know," she said. I managed a faint, unsteady smile. "Then why don't you leave?" She looked at me, really looked, and for a second I thought she might. But then she said, so quietly I almost missed it, "Because you listen when I don't know how to speak." She came in on a Friday afternoon, sunlight pooling across the floor, dust floating in it like something half alive. She didn't look like herself. Her clothes were casual, her hair loose, no careful composure this time. She held a small envelope in her hand. "I shouldn't be here," she said, standing by the doorway. "You've said that before," I replied. She almost smiled, then walked past me to the small table at the back. She placed the envelope on it, like it weighed more than paper should. "I was cleaning out some boxes," she said. "Found something I shouldn't have kept." I didn't ask what it was, but I sat down across from her. She slid the envelope closer, hesitated, then pulled it back. "It's a letter," she finally said. "From someone who used to mean everything. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. We weren't speaking when it happened." Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled against the paper. "I kept this," she said softly, "because it was the last time someone said they loved me without wanting something in return." I stayed quiet. The air felt fragile. She didn't open the letter. She just stared at it, like doing so would make it too real. "I thought I was done with that part of my life," she whispered. "Then I met you." That made my pulse quicken, but not in the way I expected. She wasn't saying it like a confession, more like an apology. "I don't mean you remind me of him," she added quickly. "It's worse than that. You make me feel how I felt before him, before everything went wrong." Her eyes finally met mine, raw, unguarded. "Do you know what that's like? To feel time bending backward? To see a version of yourself you thought was gone?" I shook my head slowly. "No, but I think I'm seeing it now." She gave a soft, shaky laugh. "You shouldn't have to carry someone else's ghost." "I don't mind," I said, "as long as you're still here." Her expression changed. Not tenderness, not distance. Just something in between, like she wanted to believe me but couldn't. Then her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, sighed, and turned it face down. "Every time I start to breathe again," she said, Something reminds me I'm still living in someone else's silence. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. The air between us felt charged, fragile, like a heartbeat waiting for something to break it. Finally, she slid the envelope toward me. "Keep it," she said. "Maybe then I'll stop opening it in my head." I didn't move. "Are you sure?" She nodded once. "It doesn't matter anymore." But when she stood, her voice trembled, barely audible as she whispered, "I just didn't think someone could make me feel alive again without touching me." She came by after dark this time, unannounced. No pretext, no car trouble, no envelope. Just her. The shop was mostly dark, one lamp still on by the counter. I'd been closing up, counting receipts, pretending the day still mattered. When I saw her silhouette in the doorway, I froze. She didn't speak, just stood there, her hand on the frame, breathing like she'd walked a long way. "You're still here," she said finally. I could say the same. That made her smile, faintly, tiredly. She stepped inside, eyes scanning the room as if to make sure it was still real. "I've been driving around for an hour," she said, "trying to decide if coming here was a mistake. And I still don't know." Her honesty hit harder than any declaration could have. We sat on the floor near the counter, backs against the wall. I poured us both some water from a plastic bottle, and she laughed softly. "You really know how to set the mood." Her hair fell loose over her shoulder, her voice quiet, unpolished. She didn't look composed anymore, and somehow that made her seem younger, more human. "I don't know what we're doing," she said after a long pause. "But every time I try to stay away, it feels worse." I nodded. "I've tried not to think about you." "How'd that go?" "Terribly." She smiled again, this time for real, small, crooked, a little sad. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was gentle, worn in, like something finally settling into its place. "I used to think I was done feeling this way," she said quietly. "That I'd aged out of it. The wanting, the uncertainty, the part where everything feels like it could fall apart if you breathe too hard." I didn't answer. I just listened, watching the way her hands rested in her lap, fingers slightly trembling, still holding themselves together. When she looked up, her eyes found mine. "You make me remember what it was like to be seen before I started hiding." Something in my chest pulled tight, not the rush of falling, but the ache of recognition. I reached out, slowly, almost without thinking, and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't move away. For a long time, we just sat there, close enough to feel each other's breathing, the warmth between us soft and quiet. The shop's clock ticked faintly. Outside, a truck passed by, its headlights flashing across the walls for half a second before fading back into the dark. She leaned her head against my shoulder. No words, no explanation, just that. After a while, she whispered, "You know this can't last." "I know." "Then why does it feel like it already has?" I didn't have an answer. Her hand found mine, fingers slipping together in the smallest, most natural way. Not a promise, not even a beginning. Just two people acknowledging something real. We stayed like that, in the quiet hum of the shop, until the lamp flickered once and went out, leaving only the soft outline of her head on my shoulder, the warmth of her hand, and the unspoken understanding that this was enough. It's been months since that night. The shop feels different now, quieter, but not empty. There's a kind of stillness that doesn't ache anymore, just breathes. I still catch myself glancing at the door sometimes, half expecting her to walk in, half hoping she won't. It's not sadness exactly, more like a habit my heart hasn't unlearned yet. Her car still comes by once in a while. She parks across the street, just long enough to remind me she's real, then drives off. We don't talk much anymore. We don't need to. Looking back, I think what we had was never about what could happen. It was about what almost did. The spaces between words. The pauses that said too much. The quiet comfort of being seen without explanation. She once told me that love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's just about finding someone who reminds you that you're still capable of feeling. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Because she didn't save me from loneliness. She just made it honest. I've changed in small ways. I don't rush as much. I don't fill silence with noise. I listen more, not just to people, but to the still things. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the slow tick of the clock, the soft rain that starts without warning. And every time it rains, I think of her, standing in that doorway, hair damp, voice steady, saying, "I'll disappear." She was right. She did. But not completely. She left a version of herself here, in the smell of coffee, in the sound of rain hitting the tin roof, in the way I look at people now. I think that's what love really does. It lingers, not as something to chase, but as something that quietly changes the shape of who you are. Last week, I found the envelope she gave me, still sealed. I never opened it. I don't think I ever will. Some things mean more when they stay unfinished. I keep it in the top drawer of my workbench, next to the wrenches and loose bolts. Small proof that even the most ordinary places can hold extraordinary moments. Sometimes customers ask why I always leave the light on after closing. I tell them it's just habit. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's for her. Or maybe it's for the part of me that still waits, not out of longing, but out of gratitude. So, if you've ever met someone who changed you quietly, who made you see yourself a little clearer, even if they couldn't stay, you'll understand. And if you haven't yet, you will. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive to last. It arrives to remind.